Hey guys, welcome to episode 1 of my adventures in role-playing. As I said before, this is going to be a semi-chronological telling of my role-playing from the time of being 11 years old until now in my late 40s. Last time I explained how I got introduced to D&D as a whole, and this time I thought I'd do a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the early TSR role-playing games that me and my friends, but between the ages of 11 and 14, we experimented with. There was basically after we all discovered D&D, there was a store at the corner of where I used to live, literally a half a block from where my apartment was. It was called the Rocking Horse, and it was a store that specialized mostly in toys and educational tools for young children. But in one corner, they had set up a display of all the stuff that was basically role-playing based. And so me and my buddies used to go by there a lot. And so I'm going to basically go through the various games that existed from TSR, the precursor to what everyone now knows as Wizards of the Coast. Because Wizards of the Coast bought them, but let's not go there. And just mention the games that existed that were other role-playing games that were in different genres, and then maybe some memories about them. So, first one I'm going to mention is Fight in the Skies, which is a World War I fighting ace. They called it a role-playing game. It's much more like a strategy game based around World War I flying that you can add role-playing elements to it if you so decide. I've never played it. I've never actually owned it. I don't know anyone who has. It's always been something that I noticed because whenever you bought a box set from TSR, one of the things they had was a leaflet or a pamphlet. And in the pamphlet there was multiple things that they advertised. And they always advertised these other games. And Fight in the Skies was always one of the ones that they offered. And apparently it's the only game that has been played every single year at Gen Con since Gen Con's inception, which is a pretty cool feat. So the next game is called Boot Hill. So Boot Hill is literally a role-playing game based around Wild West and fighting in the Wild West, or existing in the Wild West of the late 1800 frontier Americas. I think one of my friends owned it. I think we tried it out, but being young kids, we were more interested in shooting stuff and blowing stuff up than really getting immersed into a Western theme. I don't think very many of us really watched a lot of Western shows or movies, and there was the odd movie that would come out, but they never really were big. So that was that. Gamma World. Gamma World was a really neat game. It was a post-apocalyptic role-playing game based in a world of mutants and radiation and society. 100 years after some major cataclysmic event. They had really, really complicated diagrams for how to, when you discovered something like a pistol, how to use it. It wasn't just that you knew how to use it because it's an artifact from as far as your time frame is concerned, even though it's a technological device. So they had these really, really fascinating, see if I can post one in the notes below, diagrams around the complicated nature of how to determine how to use something like a pistol. We played that game a little bit. The really interesting part was creating characters because it was all randomized and you could end up with pretty twisted stuff. But my number one memory was the 6-foot-tall machine gun toting rabbits that I honestly thought for years and years and years they were called puka, because of course if anyone's ever seen the movie Harvey the Invisible Rabbit or the play, you know what a puka is, or at least in that play it's represented as a 6-foot-tall invisible pink bunny rabbit. So I thought for years and years and years I associated those two things together, and that's I recently went and looked up the first edition Gamma World rules, and actually they're called hoops. They're not called pukas. I think it'd be cooler if they were called pukas, but that's just my personal reference. But we dabbled with that game, but we really didn't get very far with it. Gangbusters. Gangbusters was a role-playing game set in the 20s and 30s of the mob era of Chicago or Atlanta or those kind of things, where basically you were trying to live a mob life or being a police officer trying to stop the mob. So, the movie Untouchables or those kind of things, or Scarface or whatever. Again, I think it was something we were slightly interested in, but I don't think we ever got into it to any extent. The next one I'll mention is Star Frontiers. Star Frontiers was a early attempt at two games. They had Alpha Dawn and they had Nighthawks. One of them was around role-playing in a futuristic world where basically you're science explorers or on a science fiction world. So it's space flight and aliens and all those kind of things. And the really cool part was there was these creatures called Dralocytes, which were one of the playable races, which were basically, think of a giant amoeba that walks around kind of in a humanoid shape. So just think of now, according to the way they're described, they're basically a whole bunch of little cells that turn into this big amoeba, but it was fascinating because one of the benefits of it is you could kind of morph your shape. So you could kind of stretch your neck out or stretch your arm out or squeeze into small spots. It's an interesting concept. And then the other aspect of Star Frontiers that they brought out around the same time is Nighthawks. And Nighthawks is literally space-based ship combat, where you literally... anybody who's played Starfleet Battles, it's kind of the same idea, except it's the TSR version of it, and I believe it predates Starfleet Battles. But so me and my buddies, we played that game for a little bit. Really, again, being a bunch of young teenagers and getting into it. The only thing I remember is that we had this assault scout ship that we gave the lovely name the Filthy Bitch. Yep. And we were playing, and we ended up taking out a frigate, which is one ship size larger than we are. And we were so cocky and happy and thought that we were awesome that we then decided to take on a destroyer. Now, a frigate is not meant to be a combative ship. A destroyer is. And we learned that real hard and real fast. And I believe the way that we finished off that Star Frontiers campaign was the crew of the Filthy Bitch were mooning the bad guys who had basically shot them out of the sky as we plummeted to our deaths to the planet below. Yep, we were a bunch of teenagers. You can't expect much more than that, can you? And then basically the game that stuck with me the longest was Top Secret. So Top Secret is a spy game based around the idea of being an international spy, trying to, find covert information or prevent the leaking of covert information. It's very much, Cold War mentality, but done with a little bit of a lot of James Bondian with regards to the tools of the trade and stuff like that. There's been 3 versions of the Top Secret role-playing game. The original Top Secret game, which came out in 1980, and I owned that. And I played that with my friends for a long time. And then there was Top Secret SI, which was basically the second version of the game, where they basically tried to tweak it and make it a little bit more streamlined and fixed it. So second edition. So it was also good. I don't remember playing that one as much. And then most recently, there's been a Kickstarter where they brought out Top Secret's New World Order. Made by a company who's been able to take over the name TSR. So it's kind of cool that, you bought a game long after TSR went gone. And, anyways, it's kind of cool. Haven't played that one yet at all. It's on my list to play with many other games. What was cool about Top Secret was I got all the modules. So there was Sprecana Stella was the module that came in the original book, which is basically... underneath of a hotel, there's a whole gambling casino outfit, and you have a mission down there. There's one where you have to parachute onto a boat and I think it's called Operation Flashpoint. I could be wrong. It's been a long time. There's Orient Express, where literally they had a really cool fold out of blue maps that showed like the train cars, and you could have an understanding. And it was really, and it was a very thick module. It was really, really cool, and I think it had like 3 or 4 different mini missions in it. But I played with my friends. The memories are vague and awesome, but the one memory that I specifically remember with great like clarity is we're playing in my friend's bedroom, because that's where we could find space to play. So there's 4 of us. There's the 3 guys who are playing, and then I'm kind of adjudicating, GMing the game. And so my one friend's sitting on my buddy's bed, another guy's sitting on a chair in the room, and then the third guy is sitting on the floor, and then I'm sitting somewhere nearby. And all I remember specifically is the guy who was sitting on the floor, his name was Jeff. He played a character who decided to be a bit of a druggie, bit of a punk rocker, drug attitude kind of thing. And the guy who sits in the bed, my friend Ben, who I'm still friends with to this day, he played a much more of a straight-laced, straight guy. Anyways, so they're in a module where they have to do something with collecting some drug from a scientist who's, I can't remember the specifics. All I remember is it involved the collection of a drug that had a strong hallucinogenic effect. And so my buddy Ben has gotten the drug. My buddy Jeff is like, okay, give me the drug. You gotta give me the drug. And my buddy Ben's like, no, I'm not giving you the drug. And my buddy Jeff's like, no, you really need to give me the drug. I gotta have that. And my buddy Ben goes, no, I pull out my gun and I level at him, and I was like, no, you can't have this. You have a problem. We just have to take this back to headquarters and deal with it. He's like, give me the drug. And in the most deadpan thing in the world, my buddy Ben goes, I shoot him. And then in a flash, in real life, my buddy Jeff, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, has leapt from a cross-legged position in one swift motion, like a cat almost, 2.5 feet off the floor and 3 feet across the room, and is grabbing my friend Ben by the throat, going, "What do you mean you shot me?" And it's just one of those moments where, of course, we all thought it was absolutely hilarious, and I wonder if any of them remember it still. But so those are my memories of the games in and around TSR that came out between the era of 1975 and 1982. Half of them I didn't play, and a couple of them I dabbled with, and one of them I played a lot and I stuck with for quite a while. And other than that, when it comes to playing games in those first couple of years, it's all a blur. That was like 30 some odd years ago. It's I can't remember all specific events. I just remember going to the public library in Owen Sound, being on the second floor, sitting around one of their big wooden round tables, and we were playing there as long as we could be quiet enough. Or if we were really good, we'd sign out the boardroom, because they had a boardroom there you could schedule, and so we'd go to the boardroom, because it was always hard. A bunch of us lived in small houses or lived in apartments, and getting 5 or 6 people into an apartment to play wasn't quite as conducive as we would have liked. So, but I remember playing lots of times, lots of different games. Remember going and playing in a guy's backyard. I don't have any specific memories of what we played or what we did. I just remember, just lots and lots of times playing for those first couple of years. And then by the time I got into middle school and high school, the memories get a little bit more involved, and I'll come back and discuss some of those in a future date. Keep in touch. You can email me at ratnef@gmail.com. That's RATENEF @gmail.com. Leave comments below, and I'll be back another time. Thanks, guys.